A lot of people want the same thing. They do not necessarily want a yacht or a private jet. They just want their working life to end sooner. And that is exactly why they get tempted into bad investing decisions. Normal investing feels slow, so the mind starts looking for a shortcut. Maybe I just need a higher return asset. Maybe I need the next big winner. Maybe boring investing is not enough. That is the myth that gets people hurt. Trying to retire early by chasing huge returns is like trying to win a road race by driving faster on bald tires. You may move quicker for a moment, but the odds of crashing go up. And when your goal is to stop working sooner, a crash does not speed up the journey. It usually delays it. Here is the calmer truth. If you want to retire earlier more reliably, the biggest levers are usually not magical returns. They are your savings rate, the amount you lose to fees and taxes, and your ability to stay invested long enough for compounding to work. That is the whole video. Pull the reliable levers instead of chasing the exciting ones. I'm going to call that the pull the reliable levers rule. If you remember one thing, remember that. And just briefly, this is education, not personalized financial or tax advice. The point here is the principle. What tends to move the date in a more dependable way? The reason this works is simple. Early retirement is not just about growing a portfolio. It is also about how much life that portfolio eventually needs to support. That is why this is not only a returns problem, it is a systems problem. Most people think only about the top line. How fast can my investments grow? But there are two sides to the equation. One is how much money you build. The other is how much spending you need that money to replace later. The beautiful thing about the reliable levers is that some of them help from both directions at once. Start with the most underrated one, savings rate. Your savings rate is just the share of your income that you keep and invest instead of spend. It sounds basic, which is exactly why people overlook it. But this lever is powerful because it does two jobs at the same time. It pushes more money into your portfolio now, and it can keep your lifestyle from expanding so much that your future portfolio has to carry a heavier load. Think of it this way. Your savings rate is the size of the engine you feed. Investment return is the wind at your back. People obsess over the wind because it feels exciting, but they control the fuel. Picture someone who gets a raise. They have two choices. One path is to let that raise disappear into a bigger car payment, nicer upgrades, and a more expensive monthly life. The other path is to direct most of that increase into retirement accounts and long-term investing, while keeping lifestyle inflation modest. Nothing dramatic happens that month. There is no emotional rush. No one at dinner is impressed, but that quiet decision can shorten the working timeline in a very real way. Now, let me make that concrete with a clearly hypothetical example. Imagine two workers with similar incomes. Each starts with $20,000 invested. One saves $500 a month because most raises get spent. The other follows the pull the reliable levers rule and saves $1,000 a month by capturing raises instead of upgrading every part of life. Assume, purely for illustration, both earn the same rough 7% annual return before fees and taxes over a long stretch. After 20 years, the first investor would end up with about $300,000, while the second would have about $600,000, a gap of about $300,000. Same market return assumption, very different outcome, because the controllable lever was bigger. And that example still leaves out the second effect. The person saving more often also builds a life that costs less to maintain. So not only is the portfolio larger, the target may be smaller. That is why savings rate can move the date forward more directly than people expect. The next part of the pull the reliable levers rule is what quietly leaks out. Even a good savings habit can get slowed down by friction. Fees and taxes are the invisible leaks. A fee is not just money gone today. It is money that cannot compound next year, or the year after that, or the year after that. Small recurring costs compound in reverse. They shrink the base that future growth gets to work on. Taxes matter in a similar way. At a high level, tax efficiency simply means being thoughtful about account choice, holding period, and avoiding unnecessary taxable events where appropriate under the rules that apply to you. This is not about loopholes or tricks. It is about understanding that money lost to taxes along the way has less time to stay invested and grow. The easiest way to picture this is a bucket with tiny holes in it. You can pour water in all day, but if you ignore the leaks, you are working harder for less result. Imagine two identical portfolios before expenses. Same starting balance, same general market exposure, but one has more layered costs and more frequent taxable selling. The other is simple, low cost, diversified, and tax-aware. Over time, the difference does not come from genius. It comes from less friction. One bucket keeps more water. That matters because when people feel behind, they often search for a hotter investment instead of fixing the leaks right in front of them. But lowering recurring costs is one of the few improvements that does not require predicting anything. Now we get to the part many investors underestimate most: behavior. This is where return chasing often falls apart. A return on paper is not the same as a return you actually keep. If an investment is so volatile that you pile in late, panic during a drop, or stop contributing because it suddenly feels dangerous, then the headline return was never really yours. This is where sequence risk and behavior risk matter. The order of returns matters, especially as money gets larger and as you get closer to needing it. But behavior risk is often even more immediate. It is the damage people do when fear and greed take over. Imagine an investor who gets excited by a fast-rising asset. They watch it climb, feel left behind, and finally pile in after a big run. Then the price drops hard. Suddenly, the story that sounded smart feels unbearable. They sell to stop the pain. On paper, that asset may still show an impressive long-term path. In real life, that investor captured the excitement and the drawdown, but not much of the return. Now imagine another investor in the same period who keeps buying on schedule into a broad, diversified portfolio. No drama, no heroic predictions, just steady investing. Or picture a market decline. One person stops contributions because they think, "This is not working. I will wait until things feel safe again." Another person keeps contributions automatic through the downturn. The second person is not avoiding risk. They are doing something more important. They are keeping the compounding engine alive. Staying invested is like keeping a plane on its flight path through turbulence. The bumps are uncomfortable, but jumping out is what ruins the trip. This is why the pull the reliable levers rule matters so much. It focuses you on the return you can actually capture, not the fantasy return that only exists if you time everything perfectly and keep your emotions under control in the middle of chaos. Put it all together, and the contrast becomes clear. Imagine two workers earning similar incomes over many years. One spends most raises and hunts for the next hot investment because they want acceleration. The other increases automatic investing each time pay rises, uses low-cost diversified funds as a general concept, stays aware of taxes, and avoids unnecessary trading. In any single month, the second person looks boring. But over years, boring starts to look powerful. That is because early retirement is less like finding a hidden treasure chest and more like shortening a staircase. You safely take 2 steps at once where you can. Save more, leak less, and keep climbing. Chasing magical returns is more like taking random shortcuts through side streets. Sometimes they look faster, sometimes they even are. But getting lost, getting stuck, or turning around can make the whole trip longer. So if your goal is to retire earlier, define acceleration correctly. It usually does not come from finding some special asset that changes your life overnight. It comes from a higher savings rate, lower friction from fees and taxes, and the discipline to stay invested through uncomfortable periods so compounding has time to matter. That is the pull the reliable levers rule. You become the kind of investor who stops trying to be clever every week and starts trying to be effective over decades. Patient, systematic, hard to shake. Less interested in stories, more interested in what actually moves the date. If that way of thinking helps cut through the noise, stick around. This channel is about building wealth steadily, with fewer illusions and better principles. And if you want, tell me in the comments which reliable lever you think matters most in your own plan.